I will call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for February 28th. If you'll all please join me for the pledge. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Navarez, roll call, please. Here. Oh,
Chair Longstreet.
here.
Vice Chair Clark. Commissioner Cavazza. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner McGill. Here. Commissioner Armbruster.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Okay.
Commissioner Perry.
Here.
Go.
Great. Do we have any changes to the agenda? All right. Written communications. That brings us to public comment, and we have one speaker. If you'd like to join us up at the podium, Mr. Jeffries.
Yes.
And we'll give you 2 minutes there.
Two
Thank
minutes. Don't cut me off like the mayor did yesterday.
You might. You never know.
I just want to say thank you to the Parks and Recreation. We've had some changes happening at Pilgrim Terrace, on Modoc, at the community gardens. We've improved our relationships with the Parks and Recreation Division, mainly because of Rich Hanna and his hard work. So I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that Rich was out there doing his job. And we've kind of kissed and made up, and we've gotten a lot of things done. And, basically, all we have to do now is the accessibility gardens. I want to invite each one of you there to view our tower gardens. Last year, we produced 9,000 pounds of produce in 1,500 square feet for giveaway and consumption. So that's a lot in 1,500 square feet. So basically, we're facing a famine, and we need to go vertical, and we need to feed people nutritional food. And I feed my residents one nutritional meal a day for free. And we do that because of the Tower Gardens and because you guys have worked with us and the city has allowed us to do that. We're happier than pigs in Waller.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank
you. I do believe that's the full purpose of those community gardens, is to make sure people have healthy food. So thank you for coming in and bringing that to our attention. Seeing no more public comment, I will close public comment and move right on to the Youth Council report. Welcome. We'll get you in and out of here in a timely fashion today.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the Commission, if any of you don't know me or haven't met me, my name is Jensen Steady, and I'm currently the chair of the Santa Barbara Youth Council. So just a few things to report right now. Yesterday we held a meeting, and we actually had quite a few people come regarding gun violence and the school shooting that happened. So we had quite a long discussion with a lot of people from the community, and the Youth Council voted to support their efforts in making sure kids feel safe in our schools. And we're going to continue discussing what that looks like at our meeting this coming Monday, possibly creating an ad hoc committee and seeing what we're going to do from here. Secondly, we have been working with City TV and actually just filmed a public service announcement ad for the new smoking law. So just, letting people know and making sure everyone knows the law and how it works. And that's currently being put together and edited, and we'll see how that turns out soon. We are also starting recruitment soon for the coming year, so that'll be happening in March, April. I don't know the exact dates. And then finally, we are currently working on and planning our community education workshop, which was part of our ALMA Adolescent Leaders Modeling Acceptance Grant that we got. So part of that grant is putting on a community education workshop to demonstrate our findings, and we're going to have panelists. And that will be on April 28th. We're still determining the location. We're in the early planning stages of that right now. But that's currently being planned. And that's it for now. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
As you move forward with the gun violence issue, is there a way to make sure that the commissioners get information on what our youth council is doing? So personally, I support lessening having guns in our community and the safety in our schools. So I would like to know and be able to support the youth council's work, because I think that meaningful change is going to come from you, not from our generation. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr.? Okay. Thanks very much. All right. Commissioner committee assignment reports. Let's start with Commissioner Perry.
I attended the Arts and Crafts. They are building membership. I find them to be a real enthusiastic group, and I'm going to do my best to walk the show one of these near Sundays just so I can meet more of the participants and encourage what they're doing down there.
So the construction is basically over, so there must be a relief.
There is no more construction on that end of Cabrillo.
Excellent. Ms. Armbruster.
Yeah, I attended the golf committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and we reviewed uses for the player improvement fund uses. So you'll see those be coming over the next couple months. And then the golf course also has some great events coming up that everyone should check out. They're doing a lot of these new glow ball events, which is these evening events where you have a ball that glows in the dark. Sounds very fun. And everybody can check that out at on the website at playsantabarbara.com.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez-Cohen.
Yeah, I attended the Creeks committee meeting last week. We received 2 presentations. One was on the post-construction storm water best management practices installed in the public right-of-way report. It's a long one. And also the fiscal year 2017 water quality research and monitoring program. It's very informative. They were both for discussion. It wasn't really anything that was actionable, but good information.
Great. Ms. Clark.
I was unable to attend the Integrated Pest Management meeting on February 26th, but it looks like they reviewed and approved the 2017 annual report on integrated pest management strategies for the city. That report indicated that the golf department, the Parks and Rec department, and Public Works all decreased their pesticide use throughout 2017 from 2016, so good job to all those departments. There are 2 vacant spots on the Integrated Pest Management Committee. Should anyone be interested, go to the city's website to learn how to apply and become a part of that, reducing hazardous pesticide use in our community. On Wednesday, February 21st, I went to the Park Foundation board meeting where we reviewed monthly financials for the Park Foundation and received a Cabrillo Pavilion campaign update, which was informative and exciting.
Ms. McGill. You don't have an assignment yet. That's at the end of this meeting. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Commission where we received a presentation, very good and complete, from Neighborhood Outreach Services about all their programs.
Thank you. And I missed that meeting, so I'm sorry to say, but sounds like it was covered. That brings us to commission and staff communications. None. Seeing none, we'll move on to ceremonial items. Employee recognition, service pins.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, Leslie Lund, who is a recreation coordinator in our recreation division, was recognized for her 20 years of service to the city by the city administrator this month. So those of you who know Leslie, she's been integral to the rental of our beachfront facilities, and she interacts with many people throughout the city when it comes to the use of those buildings. So we're thankful that she's had a long term, and she does a great job.
Great. Thank you, and congratulations to Leslie. We now have summary of council actions that we all received. Do any commissioners have questions or comments? A busy month for capital, for projects moving forward.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes.
When does council decide to, I've never seen waived compliance with formal bid procedures before. With regards to the outdoor fitness equipment, when would they waive bid procedures?
So, Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Clark, the city's purchasing code requires, for the most part, a competitive bid process, and there is a methodology that can be applied by which we go to council to ask them to waive that by virtue of it being a single manufacturer of that particular type of equipment, or the specification is so specific, without sounding too redundant, or they're the only supplier in the United States for this equipment. So we have to take formal council action. That way the public knows that we've requested permission to sole source the purchase of this.
Any other questions? I guess the comment I would have is there's a lot of projects moving forward, and it is always interesting to read how their budget is put together, and often on a shoestring, or where money's out of other leftover projects and things like that, but where the bird refuge moving into creeks then frees up money to do the Cabrillo ball field and et cetera. So I always appreciate that creativity in funding. Thank you. We have minutes for action. Did everyone have a chance to review them? Motion? Have any changes?
Approve.
Good. Okay, we have a motion to approve. A second? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to trees.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the first item is 3849 Connie Way. The Commissioners have reviewed this type of pine in the past. It has multiple common names: star pine, cook pine. I like to refer to cook pine because star pine tells people 3 different trees, so I kind of veer out of the norm. But so I call it cook pine because it's from the Cook Islands. The tree naturally leans towards the equator wherever it's planted. It's a natural habit of the tree. The applicant is requesting to remove it because he's concerned about that lean. We've had a couple of different discussions about that. The other issue is that it has broken the entry sidewalk in 2 places. And the yard, even if the tree weren't there, the yard leans towards the foundation. Well, he gets water when it rains that runs towards the foundation. And because the tree mounds up, it's a little more pronounced in that area. The committee reviewed that application and went on a site visit. They determined that the sidewalk's far enough away that it could be repaired through some root pruning, and the tree would remain safe. And the yard could be graded across the front to around the side to allow for drainage of the water that puddles at the foundation. So their recommendation is to deny the removal.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments of staff? Anyone? Ms. Armbruster.
Do you feel like there's any danger to the home for the tree leaning?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Armbruster, as I said, the lean of the tree is natural. There's no signs that indicate that there's any defects which would preclude the safety of the tree.
Okay. Other, Ms. McGill?
Yeah. Did you have any conversations with the applicant about contingency measures? In other words, removing the tree, doing grading, and putting in something else?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner McGill, at the Street Revisor Committee site visit, the homeowner was there, and he was adamant about his concerns. I had spoken to him in the past about the issues. I reached out to him when he applied to offer to talk to him about the issues again. He did not return my efforts. At the site meeting, I handed him my business card, asked him to please call me and let's find a time to talk about the issues and what the recommendation means moving forward. He did not get back in touch with me, so I've reached out 3 separate times with the individual.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Just a comment is that I did see Mr. Downey talk extensively with the owner and offer lots of support. So he's there if the owner needs to speak to him for sure.
Okay, well, with that, I would entertain a motion. Anybody want to move?
I'll make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to deny the setback tree removal request at 3849 Connie Way.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. And any decision by this body is appealable within 10 days, so 10 business days. Okay, so that brings us to Street Tree Master Plan changes.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the first item on the Street Tree Master Plan change is the 100 block of East Sola Street. The Commission in previous meetings did make a co-designation for this block for the pink trumpet tree, if you'll recall. The committee wanted to review other evergreen trees to supplement that and replace the pittosporum, which was removed from designation at the prior meeting. There is an existing magnolia tree in that parkway in that block, and the committee felt that that tree fit well with the park and the street in that location. So the recommendation is to co-designate Magnolia grandiflora Little Gem Magnolia for the 100 block of East Sola Street.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? A motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the change. Is that correct?
Yeah.
To accept the change to the Magnolia, Little Gem Magnolia.
Okay, great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, abstained? There's no abstentions. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And now to MODOC.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the next 2 items are related to another item later on your agenda about the multi-use path project. As part of the project, they'll be creating new spaces that will allow for street trees. The current designation for the 34 through 3700 block of MODOC is both the jacaranda and queen palm. There are a couple of really small spaces that the queen palms are about the only thing that would fit, and that's why it was designated. The jacaranda, being one of our 2 official city trees, was designated in 1977 with the Street Tree Master Plan. The idea with the Street Tree Master Plan was to put official trees whenever they could at entrance points into the city. The committee reviewed that, and staff has had many discussions, and given the rural feel of that entrance, jacaranda doesn't seem to fit with the feel for that area. So the recommendation is to approve the island oak for the street trees along the MODOC and remove jacaranda from the designation. Because of that rural feel, it doesn't seem to fit.
Okay, are there questions or comments? This is a drought-tolerant tree that's more native to our area, correct?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, it's native to the Channel Islands, so it gets what we get a little sooner than we do, but it's pretty much the same amount of water.
Because that would be a concern that I would have, is that we're planting more native trees in that area, and that would have a better chance of going it alone, because this drought isn't going to go away. So it's important. I don't, and I also am not quite sure about a jacaranda on a multi-use path, because there's certain times of year that they're absolutely gorgeous, and then you deal with some cleanup that we're not going to have a capacity to clean. And it's a pathway we hope bikes and strollers and all kinds of things are on, that having all those flowers down might not be the best thing. So that would be my concern. So I would support this. A question, Ms. McGill?
Yeah, just two questions. One fairly a layperson's question, so forgive me. So just there's a beautiful coast oak at the Botanic Garden, so I know the tree. But is there a concern with massing basically predominantly one species of oak, that it could lose disease resistance or basically be subject to infestation, would be my first question. And then my second question was kind of a follow-up from the chairman's question on the nature of the path. And really what I'm concerned about is bicyclists, being married to an avid bicyclist that I'd like to see make the trip home every day. Is there a litter from the oak, particularly I'm thinking acorns, that could cause a problem for bicyclists?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner McGill, let me start with the second question first. Every tree drops something, and there will be debris that falls on the path. In my experience, the island oak is not a heavy fruiter, so I don't think that it's going to be anything excessive for the bicyclists. And I'm sorry, if you could repeat that first question. I was thinking about this response. I apologize.
Disease massing one species of oaks, yes. And with that reduce disease tolerance.
The street tree master plan is designed in such a way so that we can designate short sections of streets or blocks with differing trees as we go through the city. That part of the effort is specifically speaks to what you're asking about. That references problems that we had back east when people planted all the elm trees, and we got Dutch elm disease, and they killed their entire population. Well, in Santa Barbara, we have quite a diversity of species designated specifically for that purpose. We don't know of any strong disease issues with this tree. It does get insects at times that will, in almost all cases, not permanently harm the tree.
Thank you. Other questions or a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the changes to the street tree for Modoc Island Oak. Looks good to me.
And remove the
remove the jacaranda.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? We have a second from Commissioner Clark. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Another.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, also adjacent to the multi-use path project, they will be creating some space closer to the intersection of Modoc Road rather than down farther on Las Positas. And that space near the corner is larger than the parkways would have been on Modoc Road. So there's more space. The committee, again, felt that jacaranda is not an appropriate species for the rural area, and staff supports that. The only street trees that would be planted would be near that intersection, so it's not something that we're going to be concerned about maintaining trees adjacent to the faster speeds on that road. We'll be able to do it from the pathway at the intersection there. So the committee felt that Coast Live Oak was a good choice and consistent with a number of trees that will actually be removed for the project and help replace some of those oaks lost down farther, unfortunately necessary for to install the path. So their recommendation is, again, to remove jacaranda from designation on Las Positas and add Coast Live Oak as the designated tree.
Thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Downey? Okay.
Sorry, I have a question. So this report that's in here from the Street Tree Advisory Committee regarding the multi-use path, it's listing at the end the summary of the proposed trees. So are all the jacarandas that are listed there the ones that are going to be removed? Is that correct? It has a number of trees like on Modoc Road, Las Positas Modoc intersection, and Las Positas Road. Are those the ones that you're...
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, the listing is the proposed trees to be planted. With these changes to the designation, the jacarandas would be changed out to the other species.
Got it. That was the clarification I wanted. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? A motion, maybe?
Well, I'll make a motion to accept the proposed change to Coast Live Oak and remove jacaranda from the designation.
Second?
Second.
Okay. I would just say that I think these changes really fit in better with the whole Las Positas Valley look off that road. I think it's a good idea. Thank you. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Downey. And now we are to Santa Barbara Swim Club recognition.
Chair Longstreet and commissioners, we have two of our aquatics leadership staff, Amber Workman, who's a rec coordinator, and Tony Scholl, a supervisor, doing the presentation and also the service award to the Santa Barbara Swim Club.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Madam Chair and Commissioners, as Jill mentioned, I am Amber Workman-Hatzidakis, the aquatics coordinator for the City of Santa Barbara, and I'm excited to be here today to present on our maintenance projects. So for those of you that don't know much about Los Baños Pool, 1901 marked the opening of the first Los Baños Del Mar facility. This facility was very different from what we now know as Los Baños Pool because it featured a bowling alley, a bandstand, a roof garden, and 150 changing rooms. In 1913, the pool was destroyed by a fire. A year later, a new facility was built. The new facility featured a 64 by 35-foot plunge with a diving raft. Unfortunately, the site was again destroyed in 1925 when it was hit by an earthquake that left the building badly damaged. In 1937, the city invested in the site, this time building an outdoor pool facility that opened in 1939. The building is a combination of modern and Hispanic architectural elements, making for a perfect blend with the city's famed red tile roofs. Today, at Los Baños Pool, an average of 1,000 people use the facility every day. It's the only community pool in town that's operated year-round. Typically, Los Baños Pool is closed from about a week and a half to 2 weeks every year. But this year, in 2017, we actually had to close for 3 weeks to complete a long list of projects, which we're here to talk about today. So during the 3-week closure, which took place from December 9th to January 1st, which is a perfect time to close down the pool, it's kind of the middle of winter, projects were completed throughout the entire facility. Today we'll be talking about the projects that were completed in the pump room, weight rooms, offices, pool, deck, and locker rooms. Okay, so in the pump room, a new sanitary system called Clear Comfort was installed. This system will improve the water quality and should also help reduce the amount of chlorine that we currently use in the pool. You'll hear more about the benefits of this system later in the presentation. We also repaired a pool filter to stop sand from being pushed back into the pool, which was a a nightmare for our pool technicians. So we're really happy that that's all taken care of. And we replaced existing steel valves with high-density plastic ones. The high-density plastic valves last longer, reduce leakage, and cost less to repair. All right, so in the weight room, the outdated carpets in the weight room were replaced with a modern rubber flooring. This flooring provides a cleaner workout environment, and it also aids in injury prevention. We also repainted and repaired the ventilation fan, which is obviously very important when you're in a small workout area. All right, so in our staff offices, due to the closure of the Cabrillo bathhouse, which I know you're all well aware of, 2 of our permanent employees from the aquatic section relocated their office to Los Baños Pool. And although we're happy to have them there, this did require some additional work be done in the main office, which included painting, tile work, removal of cabinets to make space for additional workstations, the installation of additional electrical outlets, and network ports for phones, computers, and printers. So on the pool and deck, we actually replaced the in-pool water. It's important to do this on a regular basis for the health and safety of the swimmers, as well as to ensure that our equipment is not damaged. The electrician also took advantage of this time to repair the in-pool lights that were no longer working. We replaced the in-pool mastic line, and we replaced the on-deck depth tile markers. This added to the aesthetics of the facility, and the contractor was also able to maintain that look that we have at Los Baños Pool. And lastly, we repaired some deck concrete, which was just a safety concern. In the locker rooms, during the closure, both locker rooms underwent major repairs, which included the replacement of all shower heads, handles, sink faucets, mirrors, and there was a project to improve the heating and circulation, which creates a more pleasant environment and also reduces the accumulation of moisture, which can contribute to mold. Additionally, the locker rooms were renovated to create 1 private changing room stall and 1 private shower room space in each of the locker rooms. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Tony Scholl, Aquatic Supervisor, who will explain more about the people that worked on this project as well as the donations received.
Thank you, Amber. Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you for your time. I get to do the fun part. I get to thank everybody. I'm going to thank you guys all for your continued support of the Parks and Rec Department and Aquatic Section. I'd also like to give a big thanks to Amber. She helped move these projects along, and she does a fine job of coming up here and talking to you. I get a little nervous. A lot of people took place in helping our 3-week closure. You know, closing Los Baños for 3 weeks is never a fun thing to do. Like Amber said, we have 1,000 people come through each and every day, and displacing them for 3 weeks took some convincing. But I think everybody is happy when we reopened. Our public works, facility maintenance, and custodial crews did a great job. They were there the entire time throughout our vacations, and they put in a lot of good effort for us. The Santa Barbara Swim Club and Friends of Los Baños, they helped us out quite a bit. The Friends and the Swim Club got together, and they helped to replace the flooring in the gym. And then we'd like to give a special thanks out to the Santa Barbara Swim Club and the Sea Forward Foundation. They made a generous donation of a secondary sanitation system in excess of $35,000. The Santa Barbara Swim Club, they've been an integral part of the aquatic community here for over 50 years, and they work in sync with the aquatic section's mission of providing swim opportunities and promoting swimming as a lifelong sport for everybody. And the addition of the secondary sanitation system helps give everybody a little bit more enjoyment of the pool, because the system is an advanced oxidation system, which allows us to use less chlorine. And by using less chlorine and creating less chlorine byproducts, the swimmer's experience is enhanced because you got the less eye and skin irritation. And if you're like me, I jump in the water, my eyes just burn regardless. And the skin irritation is nice to drop that down. And again, I just want to thank the swim club. We got the swim club president, Paul Castleberg, here today.
Come on.
Hello? Oh, where do I have to go? Okay. Do I say anything? I don't know. I'll just, okay.
Well, we have a are we on? We have a certificate for you, which doesn't begin to say thank you enough for the partnership with Parks and Recreation to keep Los Baños in the best shape it can be. Swimming in a coastal community is one of the top exercises and sports for our community, and you make it possible for us to have a great facility. So that community partnership is greatly appreciated. So thank you very, very much. And this is to the Santa Barbara Swim Club. We couldn't do it without partners like you. So thank you very much.
I'll just echo that, and I agree that it's a great sport, and the partnership's very important to us as well. And I enjoy working with Amber and Tony and Rich on all these sorts of things. I recognize Andrea. So I think
I'm a member of the Santa Barbara Swim
That's
Club.
right.
I'm a huge supporter. I'm glad that you guys do that every year
And I
because
will
it does make
attest
a big
that,
difference.
Having swam this morning, my skin does not smell like chlorine, which is very nice.
That's great.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Are there questions from the commission? I mean, our pool, our community actually went without a pool for 14 years, from 25 to 39?
Chair Longstreet. Based on my research, yes. Unfortunately, I wasn't around at that time to confirm
Me
that.
either. Barely. I mean, I probably the next year, but I joined the commission the next year, I think.
But yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's an interesting piece of history because I joined the commission. The first meeting I attended was when we were renovating Los Baños pool, the big renovation, and they wanted to put in a Murtha pool. It was like a metal lining that they dropped in, and they wanted to not renovate the whole thing, but drop it. And it was a kind of a last-minute end run of this pool restoration, and this room was completely packed, and not all in on one side or the other. It was an interesting first meeting. So the pool has been a large feature for years. So thank you. Ms. McGill, did you have a question?
Just a quick
Comment?
curiosity question, yeah. The new secondary sanitation system, the enhanced oxidation, will that enable us to change the water less often?
Commissioner Longstreet and Commissioner McGill, yes, that is the goal of it is to lower the chlorine and the chlorine byproducts that will allow us to extend the life of the water that's in there.
So this is a significantly greater than $35,000 gift to the city.
It is. Yeah. It is.
Acknowledge that,
It's priceless almost.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Other questions or comments? Thank you so much. I think we forget about Los Baños sometimes. I mean, it's there and it's just a part of our lives. But if you think, I mean, it's not only the swim club and the master swim and all the different groups that swim, but City College uses it. It's quite an important feature in our community, and we do not have enough pools in our community. So thank you very much. And you did a fine job. Don't be nervous. You were great. We like hearing about these reports.
Chair Longstreet, I did neglect to mention that we were going to propose that we take item 8 before item 7.
Yes.
We have Ashley Shue from the Public Works Department here and RRM, the consultants. You just discussed the trees on Modoc and Las Positas. Now's the opportunity to take a look at the multi-use path and where they are in the design. This is a project that the Commission did review conceptually. I believe we also actually had a hearing here. So this is the third time for some of our commissioners, the first time for others. This is an important opportunity for the commission to express its views, particularly as it relates to the landscaping for this project and what it means for how the corridor will appear once this new facility is installed and how it relates to its current, what we consider much more of a rural nature than you find, for example, in downtown Santa Barbara on Coda Street. And also just thinking long term about not only the cost to construct something like this, but the cost to maintain it over time, including the cost to maintain the landscaping. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Longstreet and commissioners. Thank you for having me. There we go. It was stuck. My name's Ashley Hsu, and I'm with the Public Works Department. And with me today is Brian Hannigan with RRM Design Group. They're our design consultant for this project. So this afternoon, we're asking that the Commission provide comments and recommendations on the proposed landscaping plans so that we can take to the Architectural Board of Review for their next review coming up in either March or April. As a quick overview, the project is located along the south side of Modoc Road between Calle de los Amigos, which is at the westerly city limits, toward Las Positas Road, and then the path follows Las Positas Road on the west side all the way down to Cliff Drive. It's about a just under 3 mile stretch that would complete an important link in our bike network and connects the coastal route and the Pacific Coast route and the crosstown bike route. The purpose of the project is to really separate bikes and pedestrians from traffic. So it would provide a safe space for runners, pedestrians, bicyclists of all ages and abilities along these busy, high-speed corridors of Las Positas and Modoc roads. As Ms. Zachary mentioned, the Commission's previous action was in January of last year, and that was to approve the removal of up to 114 various trees along the corridor, and that was based on the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation. And the Commission did include several conditions, which included replacement trees be planted with a variety of sizes, including up to a 60-inch box. That trees be planted within the project area, have a diversity of native species, that no tree be removed until construction is funded, and that as many trees as feasible be preserved. So the goal and the vision in developing this proposed landscaping plan was really to try to enhance and be compatible, with the natural landscape that's currently along Las Positas and Modoc roads. Especially Las Positas Road is fairly rural, so we were looking for opportunities to enhance the existing tree canopy and be consistent with the existing setting. So that included proposing native trees, including coast live oak and island oak, using natural stone materials, and using some limited native drought-tolerant plants at some key locations. The next few slides is just to illustrate the proposed plant palette. These are the trees that are proposed along Modoc Road, both the jacaranda and the island oak, and along Las Positas Road is the coast live oak.
I think we just changed that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so no more jacaranda.
Yeah.
No new jacaranda along Modoc.
Correct.
Okay. I will make note of that. Thank you.
We're going with the native.
Okay. So this slide shows the palette of the drought-tolerant plantings that are proposed. It's a combination of some native grasses, succulents, and some native flowering plants as well.
Some of those were in the roundabout too.
And some of those plants were utilized in the roundabout at Las Positas and Cliff that was recently completed. So it would tie the area together. I'm just going to go briefly through the different corridors. So we'll go through Modoc Road, we'll talk about the intersection of Las Positas and Modoc Road, and then talk about Las Positas Road. And granted, your changes haven't been incorporated into this presentation. So along Modoc Road, there is a 5-foot wide parkway that will be proposed between the pathway and the roadway. And 5 feet is the minimum separation that's required between a multi-use path and the roadway without having to build some sort of physical crash-rated barrier. So along Modoc, we have the space available to be able to provide that 5-foot space. So within that space, we're proposing small crushed rock, some boulder outcroppings, and street trees. As you mentioned, that will be the island oaks. And we're proposing 56 new trees along Modoc Road. And as well, some native drought-tolerant plantings located at intersections and points of interest. And the goal here was, rather than proposing landscaping along the entire parkway, to limit it to the areas that are of more interest and to help cut down on ongoing maintenance expenses. I included a couple of representative sheets for these corridors. So this is Modoc Road at the end of the project at Calle de los Amigos. You can see the proposed parkway with the landscaping at the intersection, some boulders, and the street trees. Similarly, this is farther east at Ferrara Way. As you move up to the intersection of Las Positas and Modoc Road, it's somewhat of a gateway to the city. So for this area, we're proposing new oak trees, a combination of island oak and coast live oak, with 25 new trees proposed in this area. And they would be surrounded by wood mulch and some native drought-tolerant plantings interspersed in some key areas, which can be seen on this plan sheet. So the plantings are proposed at the path intersections, where the path ends at the intersection, and then at this proposed rest area. As now we travel down Las Positas Road, Las Positas has some different conditions from Modoc Road. A lot of this area is much more constrained in terms of having the space to fit the pathway in. So there are some areas along Las Positas where we do have to have a physical barrier between the roadway and the pathway. But there are some sections where we have the space available for the 5-foot parkway, and that's closer to the Stone Creek condos and then at near the Jerry Harwin intersection, so the entrance up to Elings Park. So we're proposing a similar palette with the small crushed rock in that parkway and boulder outcroppings and some limited native drought-tolerant plantings. The key difference along Las Positas is that no street trees are proposed within that parkway area, and that's due to a restriction from the fire department. This Las Positas is within a high fire area, and so they've set a restriction that no new trees be planted within 10 feet of the existing roadway. So that really limited us to planting trees on the opposite side of the path, so on the back side of the path, rather than in that parkway area. So again, I included a couple of key locations. This is at Veronica Springs, where we have some room to swing the path away. We had to provide this turnout for some utility access. And then as you move south, we have the space for that parkway area. This is at Rochelle Lane, which is along the Stone Creek condos. We have a proposed bus pullout at this location. And again, the parkway continues here. And this is jumping a little bit farther south. This is as you get closer to Cliff Drive and that roundabout. This bold line here is where we'll need a physical barrier. This is one of our most constrained locations. And the proposed trees you can see are on the back side of the pathway. And we're also proposing 15 new oak trees on an adjacent city-owned parcel here.
So, towards the creek, is that, yeah.
Toward the creek, correct. In terms of maintenance, the project will fund maintenance of the landscaping during the plan establishment period. Our environmental requirement is that we maintain the trees for a minimum of 7 years for an establishment period. And we haven't yet determined the establishment period for the other plantings, but 6 to 12 months is typical for those types of plantings, depending on the time of year that they actually are able to be planted. And then once those establishment periods are complete, the maintenance would be turned over to the Parks and Recreation Department.
Can I ask a question right there? I'm thinking of our restoration projects for creeks, and isn't the establishment more like 2 to 3 years for plantings? Just checking.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, in our recent projects, we have had a landscaping contractor that did the installation would be responsible for up to 2 years, and then we take it over and we contract out for that service. And that, in part, helps ensure the success of the plants and the type of objectives that we have with those projects. In the case of other projects such as these that become sort of roadway enhancements versus creek restorations, it has been on the order of the timeline that they've presented.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we appreciate your comments this afternoon on the proposal, and we plan to return to the Architectural Board of Review in March or April for their comment on the landscape plan as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's start with questions, and then we'll move into comments. Okay, Ms. Clark, start us off.
What are the boulder outcroppings? Are they large, small? Will be close to the bike path? Far from the path?
It would be a variety of sizes, and Brian, if you want to jump in on some larger boulders, some smaller boulders, to add some variety. It wouldn't be within 2 feet of the pathway. We have to keep that area clear, so it would be between the curb. So there'd be about a 3-foot swath within the parkway where those boulders could be located.
I would only add that she hit the nail on the head. It's 2 foot offset from the path edge to where we'd be placing the larger boulders. The crushed rock would be along the parkway, and then where we have the boulders, we're going to put a few plants in there around the boulders, so there'll be these little pockets along the way. We didn't plant the whole entire parkway because we wanted to be mindful of maintenance but still give a soft look to the pathway. And then the trees will be placed on MODOC. The trees will be placed in the parkway.
Thought if you're placing boulders near the bike path on Las Positas, there's going to be a lot of mountain bikers that coming from Elings are going to be looking for really fun things to go off of. And if you put plants near the base of those boulders, they might not make it. Just a thought.
Or put pokey plants there. We'll win.
Can't wait to use that word on there, pokey plants.
Yes, it is a technical
I like that.
Park
okay. That's
word. Other questions?
I had a question about, so what I've seen in other parts of the city where there's parkways that aren't supposed to have plants, or there's no plants planned, there's all kinds of weeds and other things that start growing in there, and it takes away from the overall effect of the look that the parkway was supposed to have. I'm just curious, are you guys accounting for any of that? I mean, I know it's obviously very difficult to be able to prevent that completely, but I'm just curious because I know that in other parts of the city, after a big rain or something, then all of a sudden all these weird plants start popping up, and it doesn't really look like how you wanted it to. So have you planned at all for that, or I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, weed barrier fabric underneath, and then a good thick base of the rock will help a little
Okay.
bit of that. And you always have maintenance of weeds. They always find a way to work themselves in there, but you can minimize it that way
Okay.
as much as you can.
Ms. Zachary?
Yeah, Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, that is really the challenge we face. And it's all well and good to build something, but then you have to maintain it. And there's even fewer dollars today than there were yesterday to do that kind of thing. So the strategy with a project like this is how to provide that aesthetic enhancement, which is important because we do want to do that, but balance it with not just the cost to construct it, but the cost and the reality of maintaining it. And part of the advantage of really focusing on trees is, if you notice, we have gator bags all over town. And when you plant a young tree, you can attach a gator bag to it and you can water it that way. Once it's established, shouldn't really need a whole lot of water. So by year 7, they should be doing just fine. They are going to be next to a waterway. Even along Modoc Road, there is actually quite a bit of water, and you've noticed that the trees generally do pretty well there. When it comes to landscaping, it requires irrigation, which is piping, and meters, and all city departments, including Parks and Recreation, pay for water meters and the use of water. And so, as you can imagine, that also creates another cost. So balancing all of those objectives while still providing an enhanced roadway is what we're trying to achieve. And we've been working really closely with Public Works staff on this. We're at the point where, the design, I think, of the actual bikeway is in pretty great shape. We've got to tie some loose ends up on terms of what ABR will review, and that's why it's important for you to weigh in now and talk about your recommendations. Not so much is it a nice bikeway, but how does it fit, knowing that some amount of responsibility will fall to this department with limited funds to maintain it.
And this is a perfect time to be discussing this because we're coming up on budget. And several years ago, the city took over the maintenance, or the Parks and Recreation Department took over the maintenance of medians and things. And it's a tough one. And we really have to be mindful in every project we do about the long-range impact. So this is a good time to be discussing it as we come upon budget. So I appreciate that. And I also think it isn't very progressive of us to think about adding irrigation and water meters and things to rural areas that we basically want to remain rural. I mean, that's why we are so excited to have the area off Allen Road, is because it's a natural piece of land, and we want this to reflect that also, I think. I will say, I think our statement that comes out of this commission needs to be strong in that ABR is going to be looking at it from a purely aesthetic point of view, and you can plant a beautiful aesthetic project, as we have all seen, that looks pretty ratty in 10 years if there's no money to maintain it. You can't maintain your house for 10 years, it looks pretty bad. So we want to make sure that our statement comes across from the reality of what we have and what we see in the future. So, Mr. Lester Buxton.
Yes, I'm just trying to picture where this thing is in this city, so excuse my ignorance, but will it cross State Street is yours, President? And my second question is, how will people enter the pathway? Will there be entrances for wheelchairs, or do you have to climb over the boulders to enter the pathway?
So I believe your first question was whether the pathway crosses State Street. Is that correct? So our project ends at our westerly city limits, which is about at Calle de los Amigos. That enters into the county, into county jurisdiction, and eventually, we've been talking with them. They want to have a future project to connect to our pathway, to connect to the Auburn Trail, which picks up further down Modoc. I think it's about a 1 mile gap that would exist. But they do have a future project to do that. But the project would not extend up to State Street. And your second question, the pathway is being designed to be fully ADA compliant. So there will be access ramps at all intersections and ways for wheelchairs to access the path at all intersections.
Good.
And the pathway is, in some sections it has to narrow down, but in general it's a 12-foot paved surface with 2-foot shoulders on either side. In some areas it goes down to a 10-foot wide paved surface.
Good. Good. I have a question. You said in some areas there needs to be physical barriers. Please tell me you're not going to put those ugly white things there.
It will not be white K-rail.
Well, just what's on CODA.
Oh, no.
I mean, this beautiful project needs to remain natural through that corridor.
Right.
So.
That's going to be one of the key items that the ABR is interested in looking at, and we're putting together some different options for that. It does have to be what's considered crash rated, so it has to be able to take an impact from a vehicle and protect whoever is using the trail on the other side. So there's a variety of different types. If you can think of the Rincon Trail, that's a metal, what they call type 80 barrier with a decorative railing on top. That's something that we'll bring to the ABR for consideration. We're also looking at another type 80 barrier that could be made to more resemble wood with a tan concrete. What's the right word?
Rail.
Yeah, rail.
As a rail. It's crash rated, so if a car impacts it, the pedestrian or bicycle is protected. But we also kind of want to have that rural feel to it, so we're going to look at those different options and get some input on it.
So we'll be bringing those options to the ABR.
It's not this way.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good clarification. The path on CODA is a Class 1 bike path specific, and this is a multi-use path, right? So it has different aesthetics and different way that it's presented. Is that correct?
I believe the CODA bike lane is considered a buffered bike lane.
Oh, okay.
And
so
then
it's not a
Class 1
this
is a separated
separate.
multi-use pathway, a Class 1.
Got it.
Okay. Are there other questions?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's the
Miguel?
difference.
This is sort of a half comment, half question, and it's been alluded to the multi-use and some of the safety aspects of it. And I'm particularly interested in how this project will manage those points of intersection between people, bicycles, and cars. And I'm particularly interested in this right-hand verge as you come off Modoc onto Las Positas and where this crosswalk is. Living right near there, I know that seems to be an invitation to come out of a tire-changing pit in Formula One, the way people approach that. And I'm concerned, how's that going to be managed with all of a sudden there is a crossing there that cars may not be expecting, and then how is the landscaping going to be managed to make sure that those on the path have the maximum ability to see and react to what's coming?
You want me to address that?
Sure.
The landscape will be super low. I think we're using mostly ground cover and shrubs in that location. Fortunately for that particular location, for that crossing, it's the pedestrian's higher, so they're looking down, and there's a good visibility because of the grade change in there. We're using striping throughout. Unfortunately, this is a black and white, but we're using green striping for the bike lanes at intersections, and then there'll be new striping for all the pedestrian crossings as well. And then signage would also be another way to protect them. On the other intersections, the same thing. We put stop signs on the bike portion or the bike activity along the path at each intersection. And then we have striping for both the bike and pedestrian in those locations as well. And then there'll be lighting at the intersections where there's crossings for all the crossings.
Ms. Armbruster.
You brought up at the beginning that we had talked about a number of trees that would be removed, or up to the number of trees that could be removed. And I see the presentation of what you're talking about planting. Can you talk about the overall impact of to the trees? Of there will be net new, or it'll even out?
Sure. So the removal of up to 114 trees was approved by the commission last year, with the condition that we try to save as many trees as possible. As part of our environmental mitigation, we're required to mitigate at a 5-to-1 ratio for any oak trees that have to be removed, and a 1-to-1 ratio for any non-native trees that have to be removed. So we are planting as many trees as possible within the project area, but unfortunately, because part of what I mentioned previously about the fire department restriction of not being able to plant new trees within 10 feet of the roadway on Las Positas, it really limited us in the amount of area that we have available. So we worked with Parks, and they have agreed to allow us to plant the remaining mitigation trees at an off-site location up in Barger Canyon that they have available, and have are allowing us to use that location for the remainder of the trees that need to be replanted.
Great.
What that means is, just to clarify, what that means is there are going to be less trees in that area than there are now, but they're making up for it by planting them elsewhere. And that's sort of the trade-off that you had to make in order to get the path done.
I'm not sure if you look at there will be, it looked like almost as many trees there, but the mitigation requires that 4-to-1 of oaks. So you've got a whole
so it's
bunch
additional.
It's
additional tree. The number here that I read was 251.
Yeah, it looks like
So
111.
We're taking out 114, and somewhere in our community goes 251
total.
But, yeah.
Oh,
correct.
interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You got that.
See, I read the report.
Sure.
She's good.
Well, it was one of my questions. It seemed like a very high when I was reading it. I wasn't thinking of the environmental impacts, and so I was thinking 251. Where did we get that number? So thank you for clarifying that. As we move forward, our big purview here is the landscape, and so if we have some pertinent comments we want to go forward, I think so far you will capture them, but it's really to maintain the rural quality, the native plantings, to minimize the need for maintenance. And by that, I don't want it to sound like we don't mean to maintain, but that a rural area is not maintained, and we want it to have that same feel, not manicured. We do not want to see any added irrigation to this project. Environmentally, it doesn't make sense in our community at this time. If you have other comments, I'm trying to summarize what
I think stressing the drought-tolerant usage of drought-tolerant plants as well, because I think the water usage is a huge concern.
And
it's more to me than the maintenance. But, they're both equally, I would say, I guess.
Sure, Longstreet?
Yes.
There's going to need to be a transition period for those plants to survive from planting to root growth, and they will need some form of irrigation.
Right, but it can be done in a temporary manner that does not require a meter. I believe we do that at creek sites.
Okay, but the meter is just so they can charge Parks for the use of the water.
But that's a permanent thing.
Okay.
When they install a meter,
So
that's what they would do it by truck. They would do it, by our water truck, like our small tree truck.
Or like they do in the Meridians.
Yeah. But that it would be something that would establish and then not need that. I think reviewing the palette, taking out the jacaranda, we are extremely supportive of the palette, the low growth plants that you showed us. Anything else if we...
Yes.
Okay.
That was part of my ride route, and I will say it is probably the most neglected corridor in Santa Barbara with some of the most interesting topography. As you get towards the northeastern corner towards Las Positas and Modoc, you've got a real heavily watered, wooded area with grasses in there that completely neglected and unnoticed, because if you're going 55, you don't see what's there. At the southwestern corner, where the golf course used to be, you have a whole array of introduced plants that have no business there. So the hodgepodge will be cleaned up along with just a little bit of local color. I think it's an outstanding project.
And I think that the rural quality of your proposed landscape plans fits in with what's already there in terms of the Veronica Meadows restoration, the creek area there, the wild side of Elings, and the Wilcox Douglas Family Preserve. It ties it together beautifully. Anything else would stand out like a sore thumb, I think.
Okay. Have we covered what you would like comments on? I think we want to stress to ABR that this is not to us a street tree project, a development project that way. It is a rural connection, and the importance of it to us to remain that way.
Yes, I really appreciate all your input and feedback, and we'll certainly bring that forward to the ABR. I did want to mention one change since the last time you saw this project is along Las Positas Creek, there's currently a concrete channel between Las Positas Place and Veronica Springs. And the Creeks Division had a project to do a restoration project through there. And that project has since been put on hold. And so when we last presented, we had talked about the way those two projects would work together. And so there has been some change in that respect, that we're now moving forward with the pathway design with the understanding that that restoration project isn't moving forward. And Ms. Zachary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or if you want to add anything. So there are some oak trees currently that are between where the pathway would be located and the roadway. And some of those would be impacted by the pathway project. And when we were here last, we had talked about how that area would be revegetated with the restoration project. And so I wanted to make that note, that that change has been made, and some of those oak trees will need to be removed. And because of the restrictions by the fire department, we won't be able to plant any new oak trees in their place. But within the project area, we are replanting more trees than what are being removed.
And I think the other thing that was important, didn't we talk about the variety of sizes? And that I think is still important to this commission, that we not have all 15-gallon little trees, that we want a variety so it grows into a more natural setting.
Just to let you know, when you look at the plans, you'll see different symbols, and those symbols represent the different size of the oak trees. So.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Anything further we need on this? Can you give us your timeline? I know we're through, you're in design, but
Sure.
How's the funding coming?
Sure, that's a great question. So we currently do not have construction funding secured. We've been going after grants, and we're gearing up to go after more grant funding for construction of the project this summer. So the design has been funded through the Active Transportation Program. It's a state program that's administered through Caltrans. They also receive federal money for that program. And they were gracious enough to give us money for design with Cycle 1. We applied for construction funding in cycle 3 and were not successful. But this next cycle is cycle 4, and we're gearing up to apply again. And we feel like we have a really good shot this time. We're closer to having a shovel-ready project, which is favorable to them. And we received some great feedback from them on the scoring of our application last time, and we were really, really close. So with that feedback, we feel like we can bolster up our application for this next round. And if we were to be successful, the funding year would be fiscal year 1920, so that means that we would be looking at potentially a construction start date in late 2019.
And that would be for the entire project or just?
It would be for the entire project.
Okay, that's very good, because I think we get all excited when we see these plans and we make recommendations. And we do have to be clear that the funding's not there to build it yet. Always a disappointment. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anything else you have questions or anything else from the commission?
Anything else?
I think that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
All righty.
appreciate it.
Okay. That brings us back to the director's report, I believe.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, it's on the shorter side this month. We actually have a pretty detailed capital projects update, which we often focus on. Plus, we gave you a lot of information last month, but suffice to say, Kids World reopened, and it was teeming with children, like within minutes, and lots of happy kids when we did the ribbon cutting. We've actually been talking around having a Celebrate Kids World Day at some point this spring when we have time to breathe, perhaps. And we've had a number of people that were involved in Kids World at the beginning, including a fellow by the name of Joseph Garrett, who actually helped restore some elements of the playground, and other folks that have come forward. So we're hoping to reach back to that segment who have children or grandchildren now, and just have a fun event day there. Franceschi House, you had that on your agenda last month. It did go to council. Won't give you any more detail this month since you got a full presentation, but suffice to say, City Council gave us direction to move forward with exploring the concept of an interpretive pavilion. They expanded the project description a little bit to say, well, if we're going to update the master plan and we're going to be looking at the park, let's look at the whole park, which is fine. It just means it's slightly broader. Look, we had focused our work effort around the house itself and access to the house. There's a request that we sort of keep in mind the larger park. That's appropriate. How we'd phase doing work will really depend, again, on that funding. So we'll be working on developing kind of a work plan to move it forward, securing the support of an architecture engineering firm to move forward with the interpret. And we'll probably try to do the master plan update in-house with staff rather than try to contract it out, although we might need a little bit of help. And then, as you know, the carousel moved to Hood River. In December, we are undertaking some very necessary repairs and upgrades to the building since it hadn't been touched in over 20 years, and developing different types of recreation programming and opportunities to use it for community functions and private functions. We're hopeful that at the end of March, early April, we'll be able to share it with you and see what you think, and move forward from there. So that's really it for this month. There's lots of other things going on. You've got a full agenda today. Next month you'll have more coming up, and then in April we have our fiscal year 19 budget. It sort of leads me in, if it's okay with you, Chair Longstreet, to the next item, giving you an update on our capital projects. One of the things we do when we update our budget every year is we also update our capital requests based on what we've achieved this year, how things might have changed, and we look forward into the next year, and then what sort of city funds might be available to actually support the projects that we are working on. This is a very unique time for the department. Commissioners that have been around longer will know we went through a period of scrabbling together nickels and dimes to get little projects done in parks. We are at sort of this peak of doing a lot of different things in our parks to improve both our parks and our recreation facilities. So from my standpoint, it's very exciting to be able to report on where we are and the fact that we're planning to steam ahead as much as we can. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to George Thompson.
Good afternoon. I'm the Capital Project Supervisor, so I'll be walking through just a real quick intro to the CIP. Most of you, I assume, know what it is, but I'll just talk briefly about it, and then go through about a dozen projects that are either in construction or design review, or we're just starting the concept planning process. So the department has a portion of the city's overall 6-year capital improvement program, and we've got 43 projects on the list in excess of $100 million. Those are obviously not funded, but it's a need that's identified. We have some very large projects under construction, so our annual budget for capital is a little bit bigger than usual. But that's an indication that these projects are important for the community. We have a huge inventory of facilities, both aging buildings such as the Cabrillo Pavilion, all the way down to more utilitarian buildings like the restrooms at Schofield, which need improvement but don't quite rise to the high level of importance currently, so they haven't been prioritized, but we know that they need to get done. We have a large inventory of playgrounds and other popular facilities. Some of you may have never seen the rooftop of the Carrillo Gym, but there's a picture of it, and that's another facility that is going to be a complicated project, a costly project, but an important one. So let's jump into the projects that are under construction. Cabrillo Pavilion Bathhouse renovation, it's in excess of $20 million for design and construction. If you've driven by the facility, it's all fenced off. A lot of work is happening, but most of that work is happening on the inside. Interior demolition, hazmat abatement, lead, asbestos, and then off-site we're doing window and lighting historical restoration. So we're still on track to complete the project in July 2019. The contractor's been really great so far, and let's take a look at the inside. The photo on the left is standing at the easternmost wall looking all the way across the building. It's about 250 linear feet, and really, since demolition has occurred, you get the sense of how large this building is once all the interior walls are gone. I'm at the eastern end. That opening on the left there goes out to the promenade and the beach. And so we're basically at the far eastern wall there. The center photo is an interesting photo, mainly because we're uncovering some historically interesting construction methods. These are, before cinder blocks, they use clay blocks. And then on the right is the old gym, weight room. And as part of the project, we'll be enlarging that space and making it, overall, the building a lot more user-friendly. So moving on to just down the street, Cabrillo Ballpark renovation, also under construction, $1.5 million for design and construction. The construction portion is just over $1 million, and it's a full renovation, so new turf, new irrigation, drainage improvements. We're just about at sea level, so drainage has been, and unfortunately in our larger storms in the future, it will continue to be a drainage issue because we just don't have the fall in elevation to get stormwater out in a short period of time. But we are doing things like soil amendments and some more drainage pipes to help that issue. There will be a new exercise equipment circuit, new landscaping and park entries. The photo on the lower right there is at the Milpas and Calle Puerto Vallarta intersection, looking at the restroom block. So new ADA access ramps, new compliant sidewalks and entries into the parkway. We'll add new pedestrian lighting along Cabrillo. And the entire ball field is being redone as well, including the infield. So all of that old clay material is getting replaced, new bases. We're doing laser grading, so it's not just the human eye that's grading this very flat site. It's actually a computer-controlled moto grader that moves in and is very specific on achieving those grades. And then lastly, we are doing a restroom renovation, and that'll go out to bid separately. So just a couple of photos from construction. You can see a different angle of that intersection with the restroom facility there. So some new dugout areas, new retaining wall. Turf is being removed, and actually we were able to use about 5,000 square feet of that turf at other city parks, like getting ready for spring ball season at Mackenzie Park, so we moved some of that turf over there. And then this is the intersection down at Milpas and Cambrio, a new entry walkway and new landscaping there. So as you drive by, just keep an eye on our continued progression there. They're moving quickly, and we hope to be complete by end of May, but the park won't reopen until September, and that's to allow the turf to grow in. We can't get active use on it until the turf is established. Otherwise, we risk losing it.
Can I ask a quick question right here?
Yes.
I'm just especially interested. It's right by my house, and it's really caused a lot of congestion, traffic, and it's just there's a lot of stuff going on right at that corner. I'm curious as the project progresses, are you going to be able to open up the sidewalks around there, because it's just so hard to walk around there, like or bike or do anything. So I'm just curious.
Yes, so there's actually two projects that are happening now at the site and in that neighborhood. Our project, the ballpark renovation, but Public Works just started on a sidewalk infill project, which is going from the railroad down Milpas and also extending down Calle Puerto Vallarta towards Dwight Murphy. So
Yeah, by Tri-County Produce.
exactly.
Right.
Yep. So our project will be pulling back into the park, and that's one of the reasons we started in the right-of-way, is to get all of that cleared up. And then, unfortunately, the Public Works project is just beginning, so there will be several months of continued traffic congestion and pedestrian interruption. But it's a necessary improvement because the end result will be a much better pedestrian pathway there.
Appreciate that. I know it's definitely needed. It's been totally crazy. Plus, there's the on-ramp to the freeway right there. It's just like there's no good way to get around. But hopefully, once it's done, it's going to be amazing.
Another exciting project is the new playground and patio at Muni Tennis. We just received bids yesterday for construction. We're reviewing those. It looks like we've got a responsive bid that is within our budget, and so we'll be going to City Council for award of contract as soon as possible. We want to acknowledge also the grant funding that's come together for this project from Woods Clayson and CDBG, and then supplemented with general fund. We hope to begin construction in early April, and it's about a six-week project, 6 to 8 week project, and get out of there. And really, this will be a new amenity. There's no existing playground there, so it'll be a new amenity for the neighborhood.
That's very exciting.
Super exciting. Again, I live right there. Really excited.
1,000 Steps Repair. So this is at the end of Santa Cruz Boulevard on the Mesa. All concrete structure built in the 1920s, and it shows its age. It's in a really harsh environment with salt corrosion. The lower elevation gets smashed during high tides and storm wave events. The lower section there, so next to that backhoe, you can see the sidewall of the staircase coming down. That was actually replaced in the 1970s, so it's not the original one, but you can see in the last 40 plus years, it basically needs to be replaced again. And so our project is really focused on that bottom portion of steps, and what we're proposing to do is extend the steps down further so that during the winter wave scour of the beach, you don't have this big 3-foot drop off of the last step. It will actually continue down. And so that's what that photo is indicating. We actually did a excavation there to see depth to bedrock and the condition of the footing there. We're also proposing to add handrail from the beach all the way up to the street elevation. There is none now, and the steps are slippery. It's a natural spring seepage out of the hillside there. Our next step is to go to Historic Landmarks Commission for review. It is a historic structure, so we are looking at, or being reviewed as a historic structure. We're getting our historic reports that we'll present to HLC, get feedback on our proposed design for the repair, and then we'll jump directly into permitting, which we hope will go smoothly, but it is in the coastal zone, and we may have to deal with the Coastal Commission.
Question on that. Because it is an important source of access, does that make your permitting go a little more smoothly? Because that's what they're
Generally,
about.
yes, it does. The Coastal Commission absolutely prioritizes public access to coastal resources. But again, we're working in a very constricted environment on the beach with high tides basically up to our construction zone. So it'll be a balance of protections during construction versus getting the project done and open back up to the public.
One other, quick question there. On the portion of the stairs that are going to be partially submerged at different tide times, I'm just curious, what type of material are you proposing to use, especially given what we know about how much corrosion happens? Is it metal? I mean, what do you put under there?
It'll be concrete, but since the early 1920s when this project was first constructed, advances in concrete technology have really come a long way. So higher strengths, different mixtures that you can make that are less prone to corrosion, as well as the rebar, so the metal reinforcement bar that goes into the concrete. Now we'll use epoxy-coated rebar, so it actually has a protective layer against rust and other types of corrosion. Another new amenity for the city will be an off-leash dog area that's being proposed at Mackenzie Park. So we've gone through the community outreach process. We've gone through one round of plan check, and just to step back and describe what the project actually proposes is separate areas for big and small dogs that are physically separated. So this is a little diagram that we proposed at the Architectural Board of Review. It was received well. A lot of the community members that have come to our meetings have specifically wanted that sort of separation, and I think it makes sense for a relatively small off-leash dog area. There was a vacant building on site, and we've already demolished that and removed it. So that was the first phase of the project. That's done. And now we're aiming to bid construction out in April and construct in FY19. The Louise Lowry Davis Center renovation is another project that has gotten a lot of progress in the last several months. The scope includes a full interior and exterior renovation. This is a rendering from the parking lot looking at the building, and so the most apparent change will be focusing people into the main entry. This building unfortunately suffers from a little bit of a identity crisis in terms of where you actually get into the building. And I'll show another rendering from the De La Vina entrance, which we're proposing to remove. It has an existing patio, but there's really no connection from the interior of the building to the exterior of the building. And that causes issues with misuse on the patio. Folks that are using the Davis Center that want to have events there that integrate the patio, they just don't have an option right now. So I'll show you a couple renderings that solves that issue. We've already been to Historic Landmarks Commission, and they've approved the final design, which was a big hurdle. And we are aiming to get ready to bid out construction in early fiscal year 19. So this would be coming up shortly. Right now, our cost estimate is about $1.5 million. We still have quite a few line items within that construction cost estimate to refine, and potential cost-saving areas as well. So starting at the upper left, this is coming down De La Vina. That's the proposed new facade with the entry stairway and doorway removed. And through our archival research, we discovered that that was actually what the building looked like originally. The doors were added and the stairs were added later. Currently, the building operates with those doors permanently locked, so we don't have staffing at that entrance. The parking lot is on the other side of the building, so nobody uses it currently. Going to the upper right, that's a rendering looking out towards that proposed patio, so it would be opening up that area with double doors, a lot more lighting, and then going to the lower right, that's looking out at the patio. So there are stairs that come down, and on the far side, there's an accessible ramp to meet code and allow people to get down to the patio level. And then on the lower left is a cross-section of the building, and one of the really great architectural features on the interior of the building is this exposed structural metalwork, which is all hidden above this drop ceiling. And so we'll be revealing all of that. Perhaps not painting it red, but at least it'll have that great feel of the history of the building.
Chair Longstreet, before George goes to the next slide and the next project, just a couple of things to keep in the back of your mind, because we'll be coming back and talking about how we fund these things in the next couple of months. This project's been funded by the general fund with funds that are set aside to prepare projects to be eligible for CDBG grant funding. So that's how we've gotten as far as we are. We don't have that 1.5 million. However, the building is in an area that's eligible for CDBG funds, so we'll be looking at it for a funding cycle this calendar year. We'll also be looking at the potential whether they be general fund sources, and then also other grant sources as well. So when we actually go to construction is still unknown, but our whole objective here is that we are ready to go, because when you're ready to go, it's far easier to advocate for funding because you're essentially ready to go. So a tremendous amount of work has been focused on that. I'd also point out that this historically has been a location where we've had programs that primarily serve seniors. We do that today. Our objectives with this renovation not only are to bring that patio into kind of the campus of the building, and it used to be, but change in use. Anyway, there's a variety of reasons why it isn't today. To be able to still provide the kind of recreation programming that we have, but then also meet that community need of having a really neat downtown space for community events, for private events, where we can generate revenue to help support those programs for seniors that don't generate any revenue, but we still would like to provide.
Okay, jumping from the downtown core to the foothills, we have the Parma Park Sustainable Trail Plan. I know that Kathy Fry on our staff has been to commission to update you on that, and this is showing the progress that we've done since that time period. We finished the trail assessment, so it's basically inventorying and doing a condition assessment of all of our existing trails. The general picture is that 1/3 of our trails are in good condition and require very minimal maintenance or intervention. Another third are in generally fair condition and would require minor regrading, probably with just hand tools. And then the remaining third really requires a deeper intervention. So that will be regrading, bringing in fill material, in some cases rerouting because the trail is just too steep and it continues to erode. So the report that we commissioned and we've received really goes through every linear foot of Parma Park trail system and objectifies it in condition, but also proposes the fix. And so now the next step is to take that plan and go through another community outreach effort. So bring all the folks back in that gave us advice and their wish list, make sure we're addressing their needs, and then we go into permitting and environmental review. And so that'll be through basically the fall before we can then get all of our required permits, and then at that time, we really prioritize which trail sections need to get the first round of funding.
Ms. McGill, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question on the trails that are in the worst shape and are particularly eroding. Is the plan to close them in the interim?
Chair and Commissioners, no, there's not a plan to close those. And really, part of it is we just haven't received a lot of rain. And when we do receive a lot of rain, that's when erosion happens. We're still able to do maintenance in the interim, and we continue to do that not only on vegetative fuels and invasive plants, but also cutting the trail edge vegetation back so that they are still passable. When we go out and do that, we have our crews take a look at some of those worst areas.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner McGill, I'd also add, and George alluded to this, is we have some pretty vested stakeholders that use these trails on a regular basis. And so the solutions to the trails are ones that will take time to implement. In some cases, the trails that are in the worst condition kind of aren't in a good place. So we will be, and in fact, the report does identify ways to change the routing of those. So until we move into that phase of construction, we'll do the maintenance that we can to hopefully avoid significant degradation. I'd also add that this project is funded entirely by the Parma Park Trust. So it's another example, well, one of the few examples we have of where not only was the land donated to the city by the Parma family, but Harold Parma established a trust. And we receive a disbursement every year from the trust, which goes into maintaining the park and also has allowed us to make improvements to the park because the funds have accrued over time. We met with the co-trustees yesterday, and they review and approve everything that we do. And so they're very much on board with the approach that we're taking here.
I think that it's an exceptional piece of property in the city's portfolio in that it has this trust. It's been a blessing. And I assume our trails in places like Parma Park are being more heavily used at this time because of the destruction that happened in January. So it's going to be taking a lot of use.
Okay, the next two slides represent 4 projects that are at the cusp of moving into a really big effort to reach out to the community, get input on where we're going with these parks, what sorts of activities the community wants to see. So for Ortega, Dwight Murphy Field, and Bonnet, we've just finished up a process to select a team of consultants that will then go to City Council and recommend that we enter into a contract with them to begin the master planning process. So if you look at each of these parks, they've kind of developed iteratively without the big picture analysis and plan, and that's really what we propose to do. And so pretty much everything is on the table. We're talking about sports field renovations, looking at artificial turf as a viable alternative, looking at a new swim facility at Ortega. Access and parking are issues at all of these parks. Lighting, but also looking at what new trends in recreation are happening locally and throughout the country that we might want to bring to our parks. So we'll be at City Council late March, and then directly after that roll out to set up inclusive outreach to neighborhood groups, user groups, online outreach, and then set up community workshops where we bring people in and do some hands-on activities to get to some of those answers.
And this is such a hot topic in the Neighborhood Advisory Council. I'm glad to see it moving forward, and I'll bring this back when Jacob and I go. We will say that progress is being made, but it's going to be interesting times at those parks.
I want to just clarify. So these are obviously 3 different parks, 3 different parts of the city, but you're looking at a plan of like coordinating the upgrades of all three of them together and making them part of like a system, if you will, or?
Sure. So, Chair and Commissioners, the process that we're laying out is, in order to get the most bang for our buck, we want to pair Ortega and Dwight Murphy together because there's a lot of similarities in scale of the park. So these will be two separate plans and two separate processes, but they're going in conjunction, in parallel. So we're not looking at developing one plan that would cover both parks. Each master plan process would be for each park. Is that clear? And then Bonnet would have a similar process, but it's not as big of a park. We don't have as much square footage to work with. We know that the uses that happen there in terms of sports field use will continue to see a lot of use of that park. And so the options there are a little bit more limited in what we can propose.
Yeah.
And if I could add, as we go into the longer days of the year, if you recall, the commission did a site tour. As we move into these projects, we will schedule opportunities to go to those locations with you. And once we have the consultants on board, we'll have more idea what our scope of work is and the time for community input, the opportunity to do site visits with the commission, presentations to you as part of our regular meeting cycle so that you can participate in providing input on where we're going with these projects. Kind of like Cabrillo Ballfield, but hopefully it won't take as long. We really want to do the master plan. We have general fund resources to do that, and that'll help us determine which ones might be easier to move forward more quickly, what type of funding would be needed to realize the improvements that we'll design as part of the community input, and then also just the renovation of existing facilities. The lower left photograph is the Dwight Murphy restroom facility, and if you want to go take a peek at that one day, it's an example of it's time to do something new here. And then also we have been talking to the Strong Foundation about the potential to do an fully accessible playground at Dwight Murphy, balancing all the other needs at that park, but that's one of the things that we'll be looking at the feasibility of as well.
Real quick question. Do you guys ever go into schools when you're doing community outreach and go to like a 4th grade or a 6th grade and say, what do you guys want to see?
I personally have not, and I don't believe that our program, since I've been working with the city, has, but for Ortega Park and Dwight Murphy and Bonnet, really, and the next slide that I'll show as well is a great example where we have already talked about doing some of that directed outreach to both schools, but also daycares, mom and dad groups, some of those focus groups.
And because I would say, things like we have that wonderful resource of the pool that we're limited in our use of for swimming lessons even because you can't park, and it's targeted to our youngest learn to swim. So the parents who are trying to get there with the most amount of kids in tow. And so, I think it's looking at what we have. And when it came up at the NAC meeting before last, and Matt Four from the city administrator's office was there, we also need to look at these from the whole city perspective, because some of the changes to make our parks work better involve parking, neighborhood access. It's not simply a parks and recreation issue, it's a community issue. So we've got some work to do in those, and it's not all ours. It has to be a total group, to me.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I would also add, I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, what we're doing today in Parks and Recreation is kind of unprecedented. The last park we built was in 1998, and that was Chase Pond Park. When you look at our park and recreation facilities, they've been around since the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. We haven't reinvested in our park infrastructure. That's a lot of the discussion that's been going on for the past 3, 4, 5 years when it came to looking at the city's infrastructure in general. There's a lot of priority for streets and sidewalks. That's very important. But there's lots of other city facilities that, frankly, we haven't reinvested in. So we are doing something that this city hasn't done in a very long time. So it makes it very exciting. And it does give us the opportunity to reach out to the various stakeholder groups to make sure that as we move forward, we're planning something that really meets the needs of the community. Oh, and the needs of the community have changed since the 1930s as well. So it's balancing all of those objectives. So it's very exciting to be even talking about doing these things and have a little bit of money to move them forward.
And when you also look at, I think Ortega Park's a great example with the projects that have gone in next to it and that are going in the Milpas area and the surrounding area, there is no open space for people. And I think as a community, we've missed the boat with our density without providing. And it's everything from playgrounds for children to dog parks, because those people need to be able to live a quality of life. So put that to the consultants.
One other thing that I didn't mention is we do have a $200,000 CDBG grant in for analysis and hopefully recommendation right now, and that specifically is to replace and relocate the playground at Ortega Park. We know that this master plan process will go forward and take a little bit of time, but there's a need right now to replace the playground. And so we want to get our foot in the door for the funding, allow the planning process to progress, and then we'll be able to jump in with a design project that has funding that'll be kind of the first public improvement, physical improvement at Ortega, rather than waiting for the whole design process to unroll. The last project that I'm talking about is the West Beach Splash Playground. So this is where the right next door to Los Baños del Mar is the old wading pool, which has not been in operation for years. We're proposing to put in a splash pad, which is a zero depth aquatic feature. So there's no standing water. There's very little risk of drowning. With that, there's not a requirement to have lifeguards, so your operational costs are way lower. And there's really an opportunity to integrate the existing playground there with the entire enclosed area of the former wading pool and come up with a design that really will be a great amenity for our younger intro to aquatics, a fun place to go for a picnic or birthday party. And so we hope to be again at City Council in late March with a design contract.
That's exciting. I think it brings us up to some other communities. I think we've fallen behind in so many ways because we're a built-out community in what's new in recreation, and I'm happy to see it moving forward.
So that's the last slide. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions? Thank you very much. It's exciting
Congrats.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of work that's being done. So I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. And we'll be looking at capital a little bit in our budget. We kind of are getting the previews of it, but
Yeah, Chair Longstreet, when we come back with our budget in April, we'll give you an idea of what we currently have in funding, what we would like to recommend for next year, and then also a discussion of sort of looking out a couple of years so that you have that breadth of that need, and then the options for funding, because we'll be looking at a variety of different options to move things forward.
Great, thank you. And so our last item on the agenda is our advisory committee liaison. Report. Oh, we got the coastal land use plan. I forgot that was our letter, our draft that we had spoken about, and this is just for review.
Are we just approving?
I think so, yeah. So, you've all had time to look this over. Does this convey what our concerns are with our interests in the...
Is it set in stone?
No.
The only thing that if I was rewriting it, I would add in, because I think it's beautifully written and it represents how I feel, at least after having gone to all the land use planning meetings. But we're going to encourage the Coastal Commission and City Council to balance access with habitat enhancement and preservation. I think somehow we need to work in there that granting access and maintaining access is also going to protect and preserve the public's willingness to preserve habitat, because people love what they know. And if they don't have access to it, they're not going to really understand how much it means to them. So I think we want to balance those two things, but preserving access will also promote preservation.
Okay.
I would somehow, without so many words, put it in there.
Yes, yeah.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Clark, would something like to provide both access and habitat enhancement and preservation? It doesn't. I think what you're suggesting is you don't want it suggest that habitat preservation would limit access. Is that correct? Correct. So the opportunity to enhance the habitat while not precluding access.
Right.
May I? Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is something along the lines of, by providing access that will ensure that the public interest is there to support enhancing habitat. Mm-hmm. Not quite those words. But.
Yeah.
No, access provides education to people. And buy-in, education. Yeah. Okay. Any other suggestions or additions? Then this is for action. So we would want a motion to approve this memo as amended.
Make a motion to approve this memo regarding the coastal land use plan to the Planning Commission and City Council as amended.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, we've got that.
Yeah, Chair Longstreet, Commissioners will make the change on your behalf and forward it to the Planning Commission. They're actually discussing the LUP at their meeting tomorrow. So, and it will be going to City Council, and then ultimately it has to go to the Coastal Commission. So there'll be more opportunities, I think, to hopefully discuss it and then move forward with implementation.
As Commissioner Clark and I experienced in the many meetings and years of writing this, yeah, it's not going to go fast. It's not going to slip away from us. Don't worry. Into immediate approval. Okay, now we're to the liaisons. And we only have one vacancy. First thing, is everyone happy with what they do? Would anyone like to switch to youth council? Would anybody like to particularly be youth? How does...
I think is there two vacancies, the youth council and the park foundation?
Oh, the park foundation. Yes, I guess we can add a commissioner to the park foundation. The park foundation board will be heavily involved in the moving the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion project forward, as well as hopefully contributing to youth and different programs within. It is the fundraising arm. The Park Foundation also is the 501c3 that, yes, umbrellas the money from some of our smaller groups. So the dancers, the senior dancers, and different groups like that. So if anybody's completely interested in that, we'd love to have you join. And their meetings are the third Wednesday at noon. They meet at the Carrillo Rec Center still. So anybody, is that something you'd be interested in?
Potentially. It's a hard time to
It
be able
is
to make a meeting. And it's the same day of the month as I have my other meeting, so that would make that day a little impacted. So that would be my only hesitation.
You have classes at?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one where if A, it didn't matter what I looked like when I showed up, and it seriously didn't matter what I looked like.
It's not like here.
and I could be a few minutes late on occasion. It sounds really interesting. It's a challenging time. I'd be doing a dash.
Well, because I pretty much don't miss any of them, so anyone extra would be an added bonus. It wouldn't, I think, necessarily. Am I wrong, Jill? It would be okay if someone.
So the Park Foundation has played an instrumental role in advancing a lot of initiatives for the Parks and Recreation Department. And it's essentially functions as a nonprofit support for Parks and Recreation. It gives us the opportunity to apply for grants, for program development. It gives the opportunity for community members that want to give to a certain program to do it through a 501c3. A perfect example of that is Monica's Swim. So Monica reaches out to her swimming friends and asks for money every spring, and it funds the free Learn to Swim program at Ortega Park. And so it's a way to connect the department to the community around community desires. And then we've had other opportunities. I mean, the Cabrillo Pavilion project is one, but the Park Foundation can take up other projects that it sees are important to advance as it moves forward in the future.
Yes.
Well, I'm certainly willing to give it a go if
Okay.
People don't mind mud and paint splattered commissioners. Nope. That might be a few minutes late.
Okay, we'll put, now the Youth Council.
I would like to change to Youth Council.
Excellent. The Youth Council, it sounds to me, is going into a kind of exciting time, I think. So that's wonderful. So I think we can, the Neighborhood Advisory Council, I don't think we need a second person, do we? You don't think so, do you, Jacob?
I'm happy to come if needed, but my passion is with the Youth Council.
Okay. Well, I am on the Neighborhood Advisory Council. I think that serves. I think does that.
Are you still the chair?
No. No, I'm not. I get to just sit back. It's kind of nice. But I am on it for the next couple of years. So, all right. Does that complete our task with this, Ms. Zachary? All right, we are complete. And that concludes our business. And so with that, we will adjourn the meeting until March.